Technical news reading. Your caffeine craving, genetic or learned? Your caffeine craving, genetic or learned? This is technical news reading for World Reading Club in association with Uniquilibrium. This article is once again from neurosciencenews.com. From today is the date of reading, June 18th, 2024. And it's under the categories of featured, genetics, and neuroscience. Summary. A new study suggests that your love for coffee may be influenced by your genes. Researchers compared genetic data with coffee consumption habits in the US and UK, finding a genetic link to coffee intake. However, the study also revealed complex relationships between coffee consumption, certain health conditions, and the environment. Key facts. Genetic variants inherited from parents can influence how much coffee you drink. Point. There are links between coffee consumption, genetics, and health outcomes like obesity and substance use. Point. The relationship between coffee and psychiatric disorders varies between populations, suggesting environmental influence. Source, University of Western Ontario. All right, I'm going to have some kombucha real quick. And then continue. I have one coffee a day now. Especially since I got rid of all my other addictions. So I wonder how much this is going to address that, as I'm straight edge now. No alcohol for years, for a few years now. No nicotine products and no marijuana, nothing else like that. So, all right, let's see. Again, this is Your Caffeine Craving, Genetic or Learn, neurosciencenews.com. The source, University of Western Ontario. It's 9 a.m. and coffee shops are bustling with the line for the drive-thru wrapped around the building. This is a common occurrence around the globe as coffee is one of the most widely consumed beverages. Right there, that might be a reason why I stop again, because I don't want to be part of the in crowd. I do not want to be part of the in crowd. But is our taste for coffee passed down from our parents, or is it because of our environment? Researchers from the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry and the University of California, San Diego used genetic data as well as self-reported coffee consumption numbers to assemble a genome-wide association study. GWAS is the abbreviation for genome-wide association study. These types of studies use large volumes of genetic data to help researchers identify genetic variants, genes, and biology associated with a particular disease or certain health traits. And there's a nifty image here, which is kind of cool. I like the way it looks. I'm going to show you all this. It's a coffee cup with genes on, with a spiral staircase on. Oh, come on. All right. On Neuroscience News. Look at that. Look how cute that is. Look at that. My grody fingernail growing back in. It's dry. I need some moisturizer on these nails. And I need to take a bath. All right. Under that caption of that wonderful looking little coffee mug there, it says, "This doesn't mean that someone who drinks coffee is going to use other substances or develop obesity. Rather, that genetic predisposition for coffee intake is related in some way to these traits," Thorpe said. Credit Neuroscience News. That's the image, is Credit Neuroscience News. Interesting. Okay, so they just gave us a preview of what's upcoming. All right. So the researchers compared coffee consumption genetic characteristics from a 23andMe database in the United States with an even larger set of records in the United Kingdom. "We use this data to identify regions on the genome associated with whether somebody is more or less likely to consume coffee, and then identify the genes and biology and then identify the genes and biology that could underlie coffee intake, said Haley Thorpe, the lead researcher on the study and postdoctoral researcher at Western's Schulich Medicine and Dentistry. I have no idea if Haley Thorpe is a man or woman, or if they have an accent. I just make up accents whenever I feel like it when I'm reading neuroscience news. Before you started seeing my face on the videos, there are dozens and dozens of them on the Uniquilibrium YouTube, so you can hear when I start doing whatever that was I just did. All right, continuing. The results showed a genetic influence on coffee consumption. In other words, the particular gene variants inherited from parents influence how much coffee you are likely to consume. The study was published in Neuropsychopharmacology. However, the conclusions surrounding the health outcome of a cup of Java were not so definitive. You know, there's a place in Indonesia called Java, isn't there? I remember some years ago I saw a guy set up a piece of newspaper that he crumpled up on fire with his hands. Like, it reminded me just of Ken and Ryu from Street Fighter. Hadouken! But, all right, let's go. Let's continue. The group's genome-wide association study of 130,153 US-based 23andMe research participants was compared with a similar UK biobank database of 334,649 UK residents. The comparison revealed consistent positive genetic associations between coffee and harmful health outcomes such as obesity and substance use in both populations. So, it revealed consistent positive genetic associations between coffee and harmful health outcomes such as obesity and substance use in both populations. This doesn't mean that someone who drinks coffee is going to use other substances or develop obesity. Rather, that genetic predisposition for coffee intake is related in some way to these other traits, Thorpe said. I'm starting to think about my own family and coffee consumption and alcoholism and things like that, and I don't know. Correlation is not causation, or whatever that saying goes that people like to say all the time. I've heard several physicists say that, and other people trying to sound intelligent. So I'm going to say it from now on so I can sound smart. Correlation does not mean causation. Continuing, the findings became more complicated when looking at psychiatric conditions. Look at the genetics for anxiety, for instance, or bipolar and depression. In the 23andMe dataset, they tend to be positively genetically correlated with coffee intake genetics, Thorpe said. But then, in the UK biobank, you see the opposite pattern, where they're negatively genetically correlated. This is not what we expected. The researchers noted other dissimilarities between the populations. Spitting. We found positive associations between the genetics of coffee intake measured in 23andMe with psychiatric disorders. But these associations tended to be negative when examined in the UK biobank, Thorpe said. We found positive associations between the genetics of coffee intake measured in 23andMe with psychiatric disorders. So positive associations between the genetics of coffee intake measured in 23andMe with psychiatric disorders, but the associations tended to be negative when examined in the UK biobank, Thorpe said. And so some of us may not know, but when the term is used negative, it means it's not associated with the UK biobank in this sense. These divergences could be for many reasons, like a trade-off between tea and coffee intake differing between people in the US and UK. Yeah, I think a lot of times I should drink more tea, which I do. Sometimes I switch out when I'm getting done with the coffee. But I found a good balance now because I'm only drinking one. So, and higher quality coffee. Meaning I'm not drinking like that drip stuff from like Starbucks that I call puke place, the Pike place. I'm having Americanos, you know, so they're grinding those beans and pulling those shots and adding some water, and that's how I'm doing it. It's much better, stronger, you know, I don't know. All right, so while the study adds to the existing... Oh yes, these divergences could be for many reasons, like a trade-off between tea and coffee intake differing between people in the US and the UK. While the study adds to the existing literature and helps to better understand how coffee might impact an individual's health, more work is needed to understand the relationship between coffee, other substance use, and health issues across unique environments, Thorpe said. I feel like my mouth is dry and I'm like spitting out little chunks of like saliva-based foam. I can see them because of sunlight, but I don't see them on camera. It's just funny. Okay, while the study adds to the existing literature and helps to better understand how coffee might impact an individual's health, more work is needed to understand the relationship between coffee and other substance use and health issues across unique environments, Thorpe said. This study was done in collaboration with Schulich Medicine and Dentistry professor Gibran Kokar and UCSD professors Sandra Sanchez-Ruiz and Abraham Palmer. So let's see what's about this genetics and caffeine consumption research news. Well, the author was Cynthia Fazio. Why does that name sound familiar? Cynthia Fazio. Wasn't Fazio the name of one of the researchers from the Army Research Laboratory who did the paper on the asymmetric capacitor thrusters? I'm gonna have to look that up. Okay, it just seems familiar. Wait, I have that paper downloaded somewhere, so let me take a look real quick because I can't help it. So, excuse me, side note, this is how my brain does things. Sometimes I have difficulty helping it. So let's see. Documents, downloads, asymmetrical capacitor. Let's see, which one is it? Is this the Army? Yes, Army Research. Oh, it's a little bit different name. This is FOSSI. So this is the Army Research Laboratories paper I was looking at about force on an asymmetric capacitor, and as you can see, one of the authors' name is Christian Fazzi. Okay, Fazzi. Isn't Fazzi the name of like one of the Muppets? And so this author's name is Fazio. Okay, so that was close. All right. The source is University of Western Ontario. The image that we looked at earlier with the cute cup of coffee with the spiral on it was the gene spiral on it was from Neuroscience News. And there's a fighter jet. Looks like it's going in for a landing. Get lots of that in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. All right, so the original research is closed access, meaning it's not widely available to the public, and it is titled Genome-Wide Association Studies of Coffee Intake in UK-US Participants of European Ancestry Uncover Cohort-Specific Genetic Associations by Haley H.A. Thorpe and others, Neuropsychopharmacology. Well, that wasn't stated earlier in the article that it was participants of European ancestry, but that's the name of the title. That's the name of the original research article that's under closed access. They give us a little piece here in an abstract. So as usual in my technical news reading of Neuroscience News, I will read the abstract, which once again is titled Genome-Wide Association Studies of Coffee Intake in UK-US Participants of European Ancestry Uncover Cohort-Specific Genetic Associations. Coffee is one of the most widely consumed beverages. We performed a genome-wide association study, GWAS, of coffee intake in US-based 23andMe participants. The number is 130,153, and identified 7 significant loci, with many replicating in 3 multi-ancestral cohorts. We examined genetic correlations and performed a phenome-wide association study across hundreds of biomarkers, health, and lifestyle traits, then compared our results to the largest available GWAS of coffee intake from the UK Biobank. The UK Biobank number is 334,659. We observed consistent positive genetic correlations with substance use and obesity in both cohorts. Other genetic correlations were discrepant, including positive genetic correlations between coffee intake and psychiatric illnesses, pain, and gastrointestinal traits in 23andMe that were absent or negative in the UKB, and genetic correlations with cognition that were negative in 23andMe but positive in the UKB. Phenome-wide association study using polygenic scores of coffee intake derived from 23andMe or UKB, remember that's again the UK Biobank summary, statistics also revealed consistent associations with increased odds of obesity and red blood cell related traits, but all other associations were cohort specific. Our study shows that the genetics of coffee intake associate with substance use and obesity across cohorts, but also that GWAS performed in different populations could capture cultural differences in the relationship between behavior and genetics. That was that T that they were talking about earlier. Well, that's it. That's enough of that abstract there. So, I mean, it's still inconclusive. One thing that I have heard, though, is I think one of the reasons perhaps that could lead to obesity, especially if someone's not necessarily that physically active, especially probably in men more than women, it's possible, is that one of the things that caffeine does, well, a few of the things, and I'm thinking about it. One thing that it does, though, is that it competes for adenosine receptors in the brain. And so depending on when you drink it, if it's too late in the evening, sometimes you might not be getting, first of all, enough time of sleep, and then not enough quality sleep, and not enough in both the non-rapid eye movement sleep and rapid eye movement sleep, known as NREM and REM sleep. And there are definite factors there that a lot of research has shown that when you don't get enough sleep, you have an uptick in something called ghrelin, which is a hormone that makes you more hungry, and a lowering of leptin, which is a hormone that makes you feel already satisfied with food. And that's interesting. I like that word leptin because it reminds me, it's from the Greek lepsis, which is where we get neuroleptic drugs from. Neuroleptic meaning lepsis meaning seizing. So neuroleptic drugs are the atypical antipsychotics, and the antipsychotics, those are known as neuroleptic or nerve seizing drugs, like people who have epilepsy, they have seizures, seizures. Leptin. So leptin means seizing. It seizes your hunger. It stops the hunger. And so the other thing too is that I heard, but I'm not certain, but I'm just mentioning it, is that caffeine may also have some effect on the lowering of testosterone. And so perhaps a combination of the lowering of testosterone, if that's something that happens with caffeine intake, especially excessive caffeine intake, and the lack of sleep, which also, by the way, if you don't sleep enough, it'll lower testosterone in men, and possibly women as well. And so if you have a lowering of testosterone and a lack of sleep because you're drinking coffee after a certain time and not getting enough quality of sleep and enough time in sleep, and therefore you're hungrier with less testosterone, then that might lead to obesity. And then there's not getting enough sleep, psychiatric, it's a lot. You guys should check out great book by Matthew Walker, PhD, called Why We Sleep. It's extensively researched, wonderful book. But that's the end of this. This is Neuroscience News. They always ask to join their newsletter. You can sign up to receive their recent neuroscience headlines and summaries sent to your email once a day, totally free. They say, we hate spam and only use your email to contact you about newsletters. You can cancel your subscription at any time. I regularly get neuroscience news in my mailbox, and that's why I've been reading it so long, because I think that it's fantastic. Neuroscience News posts science research news from labs, universities, hospitals, and news departments around the world. Science articles cover neuroscience, psychology, AI, robotics, neurology, brain cancer, mental health, machine learning, autism, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, brain research, depression, and other sciences. This is a technical news reading from neurosciencenews.com, titled Your Caffeine Craving, Genetic or Learned. It was published at the time of the day of this reading, which is June 18th, 2024, under the categories of featured, genetics, and neuroscience. This is a technical news reading for World Reading Club by me, Hakeem Ali Bokus Alexander, in association with Uniquilibrium.